My colleague, Charles Leonard, spoke to him via Zoom earlier this week. Charles, how did it come about?
Musa, some persistence and I guess a bit of good luck. I tried sometime earlier last year and he emailed back saying that his diary was fully booked until the end of the year. I took a chance by sending him another request just before Christmas and he came back with a huge present when he agreed to do the interview this week. It was great timing too, just as Donald Trump's presidency came to a chaotic end in the United States. And of course it was an honor to speak to Noam Chomsky, but also slightly intimidating. Chomsky is, as we know, one of the most respected progressive commentators and writers on social justice, and for over several decades. He's written over 150 books on topics such as linguistics, politics, media, and history. Chomsky is the 8th most cited source after Marx, Lenin, Shakespeare, Aristotle, the Bible, Plato, and Freud. We spoke on Monday night and the interview was strictly 20 minutes long because the 92-year-old intellectual had back-to-back interviews lined up for the whole day. Let's start by looking at what got Trump elected in the first place. How did he do it? Was he clever? Was he sly? Or was it that Americans have an appetite for fascism and that's what got him elected?
I don't think it's an appetite for fascism. He got elected because there's all over much of the world, there's a very understandable mood of anger, resentment, distrust of institutions. People, I think we can trace it back to 40 years of neoliberal politics, a neoliberal regime, which has caused great harm to the general population. Just to give you a rough estimate, there was a recent study in the United States by the quasi-governmental Rand Corporation, very respectable outfit, that estimated the transfer of wealth from the lower 90% of the population to the ultra-rich, meaning mostly the top fraction of 1%, the transfer of wealth in the last 40 years. Their estimate is about $50 trillion transferred from working people and the middle class to the super rich who have doubled their share of income from 10% to 20%. That's the top 0.1%. This is happening all over the world, wherever the neoliberal programs have been applied. And people become angry. They don't know exactly why. They don't see the details of what's going on, but they can see it in their lives. And that's very fertile terrain for a demagogue who can come and say, I'm your savior. I love you. Follow me. Hold up a sign with one hand saying, I love you. And with the other hand, stab you in the back, which is exactly what the legislative programs are. So you take a look at Trump's legislative programs. The main one is a tax bill, which increases taxes for the poor and the working class and lowers them for the very rich. After Trump, this is the first time in 100 years in which billionaires pay a lower rate of tax than their secretary, the working man. And meanwhile, at the same time, he's saying, I stand for you, I love you. The other party, the Democrats, abandoned the working class half a century ago, so they don't offer any alternative. And the Republicans at least can plead what are called cultural issues, white supremacy, religion, abortion, guns, anything but policies. On the policies, they're very anti-labor, very destructive. But a demagogue can come and say, I'm letting you have your guns. I'm letting you be a white supremacist. I'm kicking out the immigrants and torturing their children, so vote for me. I mean, it ends up looking like the symptoms of fascism. but I don't think that's the intent. Fascism is way above Trump's intellectual level. He has no ideology, just me,
Am I right in saying that that explains why private wealth, why capital, why the corporate America, why they tolerated Trump, even though he was brash and he was a braggart, because he was their man?
That's an illusion created by media deception. What happened is the big donors, the rich donors, haven't changed at all. They're still pouring money into the Republican Party, which returns the favor by pouring money into their pockets. On January 6th, the corporate sector recognized that President Trump, who they had tolerated, was going too far. They just wanted to get rid of him, go back to business. So they made some minor warning saying to the Republican leadership, get rid of this guy, and then we'll go back to where we were. And they very quickly did it. They answered to their donors. If you notice, it was mostly senators who defected, not people in the House of Representatives. And there's a reason for that. The Senate is much more dependent on big donations, and they don't want to antagonize the very rich who they work for. So they said, okay, Trump, time to get out. And now let's go back to trying to enrich ourselves and harm everyone else. Nothing much has changed.
One thing that struck me now, 4 years later, would the world have been in deeper trouble if Trump was more organized, more together, more political, had more of an ideology?
I've said for decades, I've written way before Trump, that if a Hitler type appeared in the United States, a charismatic leader who had an ideology, we would be in serious trouble. Fortunately, all of the power-hungry extremists have been very incompetent. Joe McCarthy was a thug. Richard Nixon couldn't get it together. Trump is just a con man. We haven't had that kind of figure yet. If it came, it would be very dangerous. There are undercurrents in American life which are very threatening. White supremacy, for example, xenophobia. These are very deep. Racism is very deep in American life. It doesn't take much to bring it to the surface. And somebody like Trump was brilliant at tapping all of the poisons that lie right below the surface in American society. He did it without an ideology, just me, But if someone came along with a real ideological commitment to something like fascism, I think he would succeed in the United States. Or would at least be a battle.
How do you avoid another Trump?
The way to avoid another Trump is for the Democratic Party to return to what it was in the New Deal years, to actually offer something to the working people and the middle class, to offer them programs that will work for their benefit. We're still living with the achievements of the New Deal era since the Second World War. There's been an intensive class war by the capitalist class to beat back those achievements, and they've succeeded substantially, but they're still there. They haven't gotten rid of Social Security. They've managed to destroy the unions. There's a residue. And if the Democrats would return to that, they could change the country totally. Actually, we saw that in the early Obama years. When Obama came in, he had very pleasant rhetoric, and people believed him. They believed there's going to be hope, change. The Democrats are going to do something for us. He had control of Congress for 2 years. He betrayed the public. After 2 years, they were already voting against him. Well, there was an opportunity that was lost. Biden, if he's under pressure from popular groups, could maybe succeed in this.
Let's look at the attempted coup of January 6th. It reminded me here in South Africa about the far right wing here before our transition to democracy. Fortunately for us, there was a buffoon in charge of the far right, and like in the US now. But were you surprised by this attempted coup? Were you shocked?
I was surprised that it went that far. I mean, it was very clear, even from the polls, that Trump's lies about the election had a very broad resonance in his voting base. The voting base of the Republican Party is in Trump's pocket. It's his party, not the leadership, but the voters, the ones who've been mobilized on these appeals to racism, white supremacy, xenophobia, immigrants, and so on. They're with him. And they believed that he won the election. You could see it in the polls. Overwhelmingly, the Republicans thought the election was stolen. So you expect a reaction. I didn't think it would get as far as an attempted coup. And frankly, I doubt that most of the people participating thought it would go that far. If you take a look at the films, a lot of people were just caught up in the excitement as people in the front of the demonstration managed to break into the Capitol building. Others were caught up in the enthusiasm. For the rich and the powerful, that was too much. They can tolerate Trump's antics as long as he keeps lining their pockets with money, as he was doing. But this was too much. So they said enough. It was a real power play. Pushed them out.
At least we had a smooth inauguration. What would you say, how should the left respond to Joe Biden?
The left should not make the mistake it made with Obama. When Obama came in, the left and working people trusted him. Obama had an army of a huge number of young activists who had been working hard for him to get him elected. When he was elected, he said, fine, we won, go home. They went home. He betrayed them. You don't put your trust in leaders. If the left and the activists make the same mistake with Biden, we'll be just like Obama. We'll get back to another Trump. If they keep the pressure, could change. He has moderately decent programs. Some of them have been imposed by left activists, but they have to keep the pressure up. Otherwise, it'll go back to the Clintonite, Wall Street-oriented, centrist Democrats, the ones who basically run the party, the ones who kept Sanders out.
Talking just once more about Trump, have we seen the last of him?
I don't think so. I think he's probably going to set himself up, maybe in his estate in Mar-a-Lago, and present himself as the authentic government, not the stolen one in the White House. And I think his troops will go along with that. And I wouldn't be at all. Mitch McConnell, the Senate Majority Leader, who's very powerful, followed the orders of the rich and told Trump, you're done. But I think he'll go back to cooperate with him. McConnell's tactics when Obama was in office were very clear. He said it, in fact. He said, we have to make the country ungovernable while Obama's in office so we can come back to power. We can harm the country as much as possible, lame the Democrats, then come back into power. I suspect they'll do exactly the same thing this time, probably in combination with Trump in some fashion, to try to make the country ungovernable. There are plenty of problems. Let's make the problems as difficult and unsolvable as possible, harm huge numbers of people, blame it on the Democrats, come back to power in 2 years and 4 years. I suspect that'll be the strategy.
That was part one of our two-part exclusive interview with Noam Chomsky. Charles Leonard continues the conversation next week, where Chomsky suggests a simple solution for conflict in the Middle East.